Under the mocking blue moon, the night was alive with an otherworldly glow, and above the blue moon loomed, a silent, enigmatic sentinel that seemed to sneer at my every thought. I could feel its icy light piercing through the darkness, as if it held some cruel secret about the fate that awaited me. Every fiber of my being bristled with both dread and defiance. For weeks, I had dreaded this night, the night of the run, a brutal ritual that forced us into a frenzied race through a forest teeming with savagery. I longed for a different fate, one of tender encounters, stolen moments of romance, and a chance to claim my life as my own. Yet here I was, caught between the call of the wild and the yearning for love. I sat in the dim light of the meeting chamber, surrounded by a circle of my kin, each wolf marked by scars and hardened expressions. The alpha, a towering figure exuding an aura of unyielding authority, fixed his piercing gaze on me. His words, cold and unrelenting, echoed in the silence like a death knell. Either we obey and join the run willingly, or we face a fate worse than death. Forced shifting, ensnarement in cages until our fate is sealed. Every syllable reverberated within me, fueling the inner turmoil that had been simmering beneath the surface for as long as I could remember. In that moment, a spark ignited deep within me, a spark of rebellion and raw, unfiltered emotion. I could no longer accept the notion that my destiny was dictated by ancient, brutal customs. My heart ached for a chance to choose love, to embrace passion on my own terms, rather than be shackled by the iron grip of tradition. I clenched my fists as memories of lost chances and unspoken dreams surged up, mingling with the acrid taste of defiance. I wanted to be more than a pawn in their cruel game. I longed to be the master of my own fate. As I looked around at the gathered wolves, some subdued, others resigned, I realized that I was the only one who dared to question the way things were. My eyes met those of the alpha, and in that instant, I defied him. I slammed my fist onto the cold, hard table, the splintering sound echoing like the breaking of chains. His glare was fierce, yet I felt a strange exhilaration, a bittersweet liberation that came with challenging destiny itself. I knew that the moment I spoke, I was crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. I refused to be a mere puppet in this cruel dance, I roared, my voice trembling with anger and raw pain. We are not beasts meant only for forced encounters. We have hearts capable of love and souls yearning for freedom. My words rang out, stirring something deep within those present, even if only a few dared to look into my eyes and see the truth of my resolve. Yet, even as I spoke, a gnawing fear took hold. The tradition was ancient and unyielding, and the consequences of defiance were as brutal as they were inevitable. My mind raced with a torrent of memories, of nights spent chained by duty, of hearts broken by unchosen fates, and of whispered dreams of a life unburdened by the legacy of violence. Each recollection sharpened my determination. I was not merely fighting against the Alpha's decree. I was battling for the right to choose, to love freely, and to be human in a world that had forgotten what humanity meant. Outside the chamber, the cold night air seemed to pulse with the promise of both danger and possibility. I could hear the distant murmurs of the forest, the rustling of leaves, the low growls of other wolves preparing themselves for the inevitable. Run! The very atmosphere was charged with a mix of foreboding and hope, as though the night itself was urging me to break free from the chains of fate. At that moment, I made a silent vow to myself. I would not succumb to the destiny laid out for me by tradition and fear. I would fight for a life where love was earned, not forced, where the wild call of freedom was tempered by the gentle whispers of a heart unburdened by cruelty. I would challenge the old ways, and, in doing so, carve out a future that was truly my own. The blue moon's haunting glow bore witness to my rebellion, a promise of resistance against the inescapable fate that the pack demanded. As I rose from my seat, Every step I took was heavy with the weight of a destiny I intended to rewrite. The murmuring winds, the echo of my own pounding heart, and the defiant glimmer in my eyes merged into a single potent symphony of resolve. In that quiet, charged moment under the mocking blue moon, I knew that my journey was only just beginning, and the choices I made this night would forever alter the course of my life. And so, with the moon casting its ethereal light upon me, I stepped forward into the unknown, ready to defy a fate that had been written in blood and sorrow. What awaited me in the dark depths of the forest? Only the night knew, and it promised that every moment would be a fight for both freedom and love. Defiance in the pack. In the tense silence that followed my outburst, the air in the chamber grew heavy, as if even the very oxygen resented the defiance now hanging in the balance. The Alpha's eyes, cold and unyielding, bore into mine with the weight of centuries-old authority. I could feel the pulse of my own heart thundering in my ears as I stood, every muscle in my body coiled like a spring ready to shatter. Without warning, I slammed my fist down on the table once more. The sound was catastrophic, a resounding crack as wood splintered, echoing off the stone walls like a rallying cry against fate. For a moment, all I could see was the broken fragments of that table, each shard a symbol of the oppression that had long governed our pack. In that explosive act, the room seemed to tremble, and a murmur of shock rippled among the assembled wolves. The Alpha's expression twisted into a mixture of fury and disbelief. His once mighty aura now appeared brittle, as if my defiance had managed to shatter the illusion of his invincibility. In that electrifying instant, my mind raced with conflicting thoughts. I recalled the days when I believed our strength lay solely in our ferocity, the primal might that coursed through our veins. Yet deep within, a quieter, more human part of me longed for tenderness, for the chance to choose my own destiny rather than be bound by cruel tradition. We are not mere beasts destined for forced mating, I thought, my inner voice rising above the roar of anger. There is a humanity in us, a capacity for love that transcends the savage rituals of our forefathers. The Alpha sneered, his voice a venomous hiss. Do you dare challenge the order of the pack? You know the consequences of your insolence. His words were laced with threats of forced shifting, a fate worse than death, wherein we would be transformed against our will, stripped of our free will and caged until the moment of mating. The very idea sent shivers down my spine, yet it only fueled the fire within me. I could not stand by and let this barbaric tradition continue to dictate the course of our lives. I remembered, too, the heavy burden of my family legacy. My father, a towering figure of brutality and relentless tradition, had always enforced a ruthless code. His eyes, as hard as the steel of our ancestors' weapons, had once looked upon me with a blend of disappointment and contempt, an unspoken demand for submission. And then there was my cousin Felix, whose cruel ambition and twisted sense of power had made him a living embodiment of the pack's corruption. The thought of them, both father and cousin, sharing in the spoils of this accursed ritual, filled me with a revulsion that was as potent as my anger. Inside, I was torn. The legacy that bound me was steeped in the cold rituals of forced mating, a fate that not only stripped away our humanity, but also threatened to reduce us to little more than property. Yet, despite the oppressive nature of our traditions, I harbored a secret, desperate desire to carve out a life where love was a choice, not a mandate, where passion was an expression of freedom, not an act of submission. My mind screamed that there had to be more to our existence than this endless cycle of cruelty. As I stared down the Alpha, I could feel my resolve crystallizing. His authority, once so formidable, now seemed fragile, vulnerable to the unyielding truth that resided in my heart. In that moment, I realized that my anger was not merely about defiance. It was a declaration of my humanity. I would not allow the dark legacy of my forebears to chain me. I would fight, with every ounce of strength and emotion, to reclaim the dignity that had been stolen from us. A murmur of dissent began to ripple through the room. Some wolves glanced at one another, their eyes flickering with uncertainty and, perhaps, the faintest glimmer of hope. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I saw the possibility that our fate might not be as predetermined as the ancient rituals dictated. The Alpha's sneer deepened, but his words now held a desperate edge, a warning of the inevitable punishment awaiting those who dare to break free of tradition. In the darkening light of that fateful chamber, the path ahead grew uncertain. Shadows danced on the walls, and I could almost hear the whisper of destiny, urging me to stand firm in my conviction. I had shattered the silence with the splintering of wood. Now I vowed to shatter the chains of our inhumane customs. With my heart pounding and every instinct screaming rebellion, I resolved that no matter the cost, I would fight fate itself. The confrontation was far from over. As the room plunged into a murky gloom, I took a deep, steadying breath. My eyes burned with determination, and my mind churned with the promise of change. Even as darkness closed in, I knew that the struggle for our future had only just begun. There, in that charged moment, I embraced the burden of my legacy with a defiant heart, ready to challenge the ancient order and forge a new path where love and freedom could finally reign. And so, in that shadowed silence, I stepped forward, into the unknown, against the tyranny of tradition, determined to fight for a future where our souls could be free. The Relentless Ultimatum. The Alpha's command was delivered in a tone devoid of any warmth, a stark, icy decree that chilled me to the bone. His voice, measured and unyielding, pierced the heavy silence that blanketed the chamber. You have one choice. Join the run willingly, or be forced to shift and remain caged until the appointed time of mating. Every word echoed like a death sentence, stripping away the hope of freedom that I had so desperately clung to. His decree was not merely a command, it was a merciless ultimatum designed to break our spirits and assert his absolute control over our fates. As he spoke, the reality of our brutal customs unfolded before my eyes. The room was already set for the ritual. Rows of cold, metallic cages lined the far wall, and the devices meant to administer the serum for forced shifting were arranged with meticulous, sinister precision. I could almost taste the fear and resignation that hung in the air like a toxic fog. Each cage seemed to promise confinement and loss, a stark reminder that our lives were being reduced to nothing more than instruments for his twisted order. Before I could muster a reply, two of the Alphas' lieutenants approached with a swift, unsettling efficiency. One of them held a gleaming syringe filled with a viscous, dark serum. My pulse pounded in my ears as I realized what was coming next. The syringe, cold and clinical, represented the final blow to my autonomy. With hardly a moment's hesitation, they advanced toward me, their expressions void of empathy. The serum was not meant for healing or liberation. It was the key to a forced transformation, a shift against my will that would strip me of my individuality, reducing me to the mindless beast of our savage tradition. A searing pain exploded at the injection site. The serum coursed through my veins like wildfire, burning with an intensity that seemed to consume every drop of defiance I had within me. I could feel my body betray me as the transformation began, my bones aching and my muscles convulsing uncontrollably. In that excruciating moment, I became painfully aware of the duality that tormented my soul, the primal, animalistic nature imposed upon me and the lingering vestiges of my humanity that cried out for mercy. The forced shift was not simply a physical agony. It was a profound assault on my very identity. My vision blurred and darkened as the serum took hold. Every sensation, every thought, was becoming submerged beneath a tide of overwhelming pain and despair. I felt as if I were being torn apart from within, the struggle between man and beast warring fiercely inside me. Amidst this torment, a small, resolute voice in the depths of my mind refused to be silenced. It whispered of love, of freedom, of a future unbound by the tyranny of our cursed rituals. That inner vow, fragile yet unyielding, became my beacon, even as the world around me seemed to dissolve into darkness. In the midst of my pain, I made a silent promise to myself. I would defy this injustice at any cost. No matter how much the forced shift tried to strip me of my soul, I would hold on to the memory of what it meant to be truly free, to love without fear, and to choose my own destiny. I clung desperately to that promise, even as the physical agony threatened to overwhelm me completely. Every fiber of my being screamed for reprieve, yet my heart remained steadfast in its resolve to fight back. The night room spun in a chaotic dance of light and shadow. I struggled against the paralyzing effects of the serum, each moment feeling like an eternity as the edges of my consciousness began to fray. The metallic tang of blood mixed with the acrid scent of fear filled the air. I could hear the labored breaths of my packmates and the cold commands of the Alpha, as if they were coming from a distant, unreachable void. Then, as if time itself were collapsing, my strength began to wane. My limbs grew heavy, unresponsive, and a deep, numbing darkness crept in from the corners of my vision. I fought desperately to keep my mind alert, to hold on to that inner promise of rebellion. But the force of the serum was relentless. The pain was now a dull roar, echoing the despair that threatened to engulf me entirely. In those final moments of conscious resistance, I could barely whisper a defiant vow. I will not be broken. I will not surrender my humanity. But even as the words left my lips, a profound fatigue settled over me. The world began to fade, the harsh glare of the Alpha's decree, the mocking laughter of those who enforced it, and even the distant sounds of the pack, all dissolved into a void of encroaching darkness. As my vision dimmed and my body succumbed to the overwhelming force of the transformation, I teetered on the precipice of oblivion. The last thing I heard was the Alpha's cold command reverberating through my mind, a final, relentless ultimatum that promised a fate worse than death. And then, darkness claimed me completely, leaving my defiant promise echoing silently in the void, a cliffhanger suspended in the depths of my fading consciousness, nightmares of the past and the weight of destiny. As the numbing darkness began to subside, my mind was pulled back, not by the cruel present, but by the echoes of a tormented past. I found myself drifting into a vivid flashback, a scene that played out like a tragic opera under a stormy sky. I was once a timid pup in a cold, unforgiving world, and the memory of that day still sent shivers down my spine. I recalled sitting in a cavernous hall, the air thick with the oppressive heat of ancient traditions. My father loomed before me, a towering figure whose eyes held no warmth, only the icy glare of authority and disapproval. His voice, as hard as stone, recited the old laws of the pack with clinical detachment. "It is your duty," he would say, his tone leaving no room for dissent, "to endure the sacred mating ritual, for it is the very lifeblood of our lineage." Beside him my cousin Felix stood, his expression twisted in a mixture of ambition and cruelty. He was the embodiment of the pack's corrupted legacy, always eager to seize power at any cost. In that memory, the room was alive with the brutal energy of our customs. The ritual was not a celebration of union, but a stark display of dominance, a ceremony that reduced us to mere instruments of a barbaric fate. I watched, horrified and helpless, as older wolves and even my peers submitted to the ritual's demands. The ritual itself was a grotesque ballet of forced shifts and merciless confinement. The very idea of a forced transformation, a shift not of one's own choosing, filled my soul with despair. It was a cold, unyielding process that stripped away our individuality and bound us to a fate decreed by tradition. I remembered my own trembling form as I was compelled to shift, a moment of agony that seared itself into my memory. The feeling was like being torn asunder, both physically and spiritually. I desperately longed for something gentler, something tender, a love that was chosen freely, not imposed by the rigid edicts of our ancestry. Every fiber of my being yearned for the warmth of connection, for the gentle caress of a kindred soul, rather than the violent, heartless conquest demanded by our forefathers. Amidst the chaotic ritual, I saw the flicker of hope in my own heart, a spark that refused to be extinguished by cruelty and despair. Even as I was forced to endure the harsh realities of our customs, I dared to imagine a world where love could flourish on its own terms. I envisioned a future where the bond between two souls was sacred, untouched by the brutality of forced mating, and where the strength of our pack lay not in power and domination, but in compassion and mutual respect. But that memory was not just of ritual and pain. It was also the beginning of an unspoken family feud. My father's cold methods and Felix's relentless ambition cast long shadows over my heart. Their harsh traditions had forged in me a burning desire to break free from the chains of our heritage. I resented the way they valued power over love, and I despised the thought that my life could be reduced to a series of brutal rites. In those painful moments, I felt the weight of destiny pressing down on me, a legacy that threatened to crush the very essence of who I wished to be. The flashback lingered like a haunting melody. I could still hear the echoes of my father's commanding words and see the scorn in Felix's eyes. Yet, amidst the horror, there was also a gentle whisper of defiance, a promise I made to myself in that grim chamber. I vowed that I would never allow our legacy of brutality to define me. I would fight to reclaim our lost humanity, to replace the savage traditions with a new order where love, choice, and compassion reigned supreme. In that recollection, as the images of forced shifting and caged despair swirled around me, I made a silent, resolute promise. I would overturn these ancient customs, no matter the cost. The old ways had cast a long, dark shadow over our lives, but I refused to let that darkness endure. I would carry within me the spark of a gentler future, a future where the tenderness of love could flourish, even in the heart of darkness. As the memory began to fade, I clung to that promise with all the strength I had left. The pain of the past and the cruelty of tradition had shaped me, but they would not define my destiny. Even now, as I struggled against the oppressive weight of forced transformation, that vow resonated within me, echoing like a defiant heartbeat in the silence. I knew that the road ahead would be treacherous, fraught with peril and resistance from those who clung to the old ways. Yet, as the last remnants of the flashback dissolved into the encroaching night, I steeled myself with one unwavering thought. I would rewrite the fate imposed upon us. I would battle against the dark legacy of my family and forge a new path, a path where our souls could soar free, and love was a right, not a duty. With this promise echoing in my heart, I prepared myself to face the unknown, determined that, no matter how heavy the weight of destiny, I would defy it and reclaim our humanity. The journey begins. The chamber's oppressive silence still echoed in my ears as I left the meeting room, each step weighted by a tumultuous blend of anger and sorrow. The heavy wooden door groaned open, releasing me into the chill of the night, a stark contrast to the suffocating heat of that ill-fated assembly. I hesitated at the threshold, casting one last defiant glance back at the scene of my rebellion. With a deep, shuddering breath, I stepped out into the uncertain dark, leaving behind the familiar confines of the pack's brutal traditions for a journey that promised both danger and a glimmer of hope. I climbed into my Hummer, its worn leather, seats a meager comfort against the harsh reality I now faced. The engine roared to life with a steady mechanical hum, a constant companion on a road that stretched endlessly into the night. As I pulled away, the gravel crunched beneath the tires, each sound a small punctuation marking my reluctant departure from safety. The hum of the engine and the rhythmic beat of the tires on the road blended into a meditative cadence, lulling me into a state of introspection even as my heart pounded with raw emotion. Driving under the indifferent glow of streetlights, I couldn't help but wrestle with a torrent of conflicting thoughts. Every mile took me further away from the familiar faces and rigid orders of the pack, yet the uncertainty of the unknown gnawed at me. I replayed the meeting's bitter moments over and over in my mind. The harsh words, the splintering of the table, the Alpha's icy ultimatum. Those memories mingled with the fear of what lay ahead, but they were also tempered by a stubborn hope. A hope that somewhere, beyond the cruel boundaries of tradition, there existed a chance to reclaim the love and freedom we so desperately yearned for. The scent of the wilderness began to invade the cabin, carried on the cool night air through an open window. It was a rich, earthy aroma, the damp musk of rain-soaked leaves and pine, mixed with a hint of wild blossoms, which contrasted sharply with the sterile, suffocating atmosphere of the meeting room. I closed my eyes for a moment, allowing the scent to wash over me, as if to remind me of the untamed beauty of nature, a beauty that was both a sanctuary and a battlefield. It was in this wilderness that I would soon confront the perils of the run, where every rustle of leaves and every distant howl promised either salvation or doom. The road wound through a landscape that was slowly surrendering to the night. The headlights cast long, flickering shadows on the cracked pavement, mirroring the fleeting remnants of my courage. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, feeling the rough leather under my calloused fingers, as if anchoring me to a reality that was rapidly slipping away. The hum of the engine was punctuated by occasional bursts of static from the radio, snippets of old love songs and distant news reports. Reminders that life, in all its chaotic beauty, continued beyond the confines of our brutal customs. Every so often, my gaze would stray to the rearview mirror, catching the fleeting image of my own reflection. A face marked by determination, but also shadowed by doubt and a hint of despair. I wondered if I had the strength to defy destiny, to challenge the ancient rights that had dictated our lives for generations. Yet, even as fear crept in, there was an undeniable pull toward the promise of a different future, a future where love could be chosen freely and destiny could be rewritten. Gradually, the concrete road gave way to the wild embrace of nature. The urban glow faded, replaced by the soft luminescence of a star-studded sky and the occasional flicker of distant campfires. The trees, tall and imposing, lined the roadside like silent sentinels, their leaves whispering secrets to the night. I felt the boundaries of civilization dissolve, replaced by an expansive, untamed wilderness that beckoned me deeper into its shadows. Finally, after what felt like hours of solitary travel, I reached the edge of the forest. The dark canopy loomed ahead, a vast, impenetrable curtain of ancient wood and mystery. As I slowed the Hummer to a cautious stop, a shiver of anticipation ran down my spine. The forest seemed to pulse with a life of its own, each rustling leaf and distant animal call hinting at secrets hidden in its depths. With the safety of the open road now behind me, I took one last deep breath and stepped out of the vehicle. The cool night air wrapped around me like a shroud, and I could feel the weight of the unknown pressing in from all sides. My heart raced as I stood at the threshold between the familiar and the unfathomable. Ahead lay the dark forest, a living labyrinth where danger and destiny coexisted in a precarious balance. In that moment, as I gazed into the forest's impenetrable gloom, I knew that the true test of my defiance was about to begin. The dangerous run awaited, a trial that would either shatter me or forge me anew. And with that thought echoing in my mind, I stepped forward, leaving the relative safety of the road behind, and embraced the uncertainty of the night, captivity and the cage of fate. I awoke to the cold sting of confinement, my senses assaulted by the gleam of silver bars that confined me within a small, claustrophobic cell. The metal's unforgiving chill pressed against my skin as I slowly registered the harsh reality. I was trapped. This cage was not simply a physical barrier. It was a symbol of a fate predetermined by an ancient, brutal tradition that sought to strip away the remnants of my humanity. Inside the narrow confines of my prison, my dual nature warred in silence. There was the animal inside me, the wild and unbridled essence of a werewolf, yearning to tear through the bars and reclaim the freedom that was inherently mine. Yet, beneath that primal urge lay the echo of a human heart. A heart that still believed in the possibility of love, of choice, of a destiny that was not written in blood and cruelty. Every metallic clang resonated with the pain of my captivity, a constant reminder that I was being held captive not only physically, but emotionally as well. The cage's silver bars, polished to a cruel shine, cut into my flesh with every subtle movement. They were the chains of fate, the tools of a system that forced our transformation and subjugation. In the dim light that filtered through a tiny window high above, I could see each bar as an insidious barrier to my dreams. A dream of escaping this imposed nightmare and stepping into a future of self-determination. The very sight of them made my skin crawl. Yet it also fueled a quiet determination deep within me. I sat there, the harsh reality of my confinement settling over me like a heavy shroud. The scent of cold metal mingled with the musty odor of the cell, a scent that was both repulsive and hauntingly familiar. It was a reminder of all the moments I had spent in captivity before, each one a stepping stone that led me to this exact moment of bitter isolation. In those moments of despair, I often closed my eyes and imagined a different world, one where the bonds of fate could be broken, and the chains of this cruel tradition would shatter into fragments of forgotten memory. Within the confines of this cage, my mind began to work furiously. I replayed every detail of the meeting that had condemned me to this fate, every harsh word that had sealed my destiny. I studied the bars, not merely as obstacles, but as potential tools in my escape. The smooth metal, though cold and unyielding, might have weaknesses, hidden seams, or loose bolts that I could exploit. Every moment in this oppressive silence was an opportunity for planning. I visualized the structure of the cage, the precise angle of each bar, and the way the light shifted across its surface. In that intricate dance of shadows and reflections, I began to formulate a plan that promised freedom beyond the suffocating limits of these silver confines. I could almost feel the pulse of the wild outside, a tantalizing promise of liberation that beckoned me from the darkness. Even as I wrestled with the agony of being trapped, my spirit clung to the belief that beyond this cage lay a world where I could reclaim control over my destiny. I thought of the vast, open forest. I imagined the rustling of leaves and the distant, haunting howls of my kin as they ran free under the indifferent gaze of the moon. That distant call of freedom was my beacon, a reminder that there was a life waiting for me, one where I could defy the cruel mandates of our pack. My inner monologue surged with a blend of desperation and resolve. Every painful moment in captivity only strengthened my determination to break free. I recalled stories whispered among the wolves of legendary escapes, tales of cunning, of strength, of the unyielding will to survive against all odds. I was no different. Even as the forced serum had begun to twist my body against my will, I clung fiercely to the vestiges of my true self, promising that I would not be broken by this ritual of submission. As the minutes turned into what felt like endless hours, a subtle change occurred in the air, a shift that stirred a flicker of hope deep within my bruised spirit. In the distance, over the murmur of the wind and the soft rustling of leaves, I began to hear a sound that sent a shiver racing down my spine. It was low at first, almost imperceptible, a distant rhythmic beating that resonated with the pulse of the wild. My heart quickened as I strained to listen. Was it the sound of the run? The very sound of fate being set in motion? A surge of adrenaline coursed through me as the realization sank in. The run was beginning. The distant, thunderous sound of paws, hitting the earth, the haunting chorus of howls growing louder by the second. It all signaled the start of a brutal, merciless race that would decide our fates. My body tensed, every nerve alight with both terror and anticipation. In that moment, with the echo of freedom and the impending chaos of the run mingling in the night air, I knew that time was running out. The hope of escape had always been a distant dream, yet now it shone with a fierce, almost tangible light. As the sound of the run grew nearer, I pressed my ear against the cold metal, willing myself to remember every detail, every possibility for escape. The weight of my captivity bore down on me, yet the promise of the wild beyond these bars burned bright within my soul. I was on the edge, teetering between the torment of confinement and the wild, uncertain promise of freedom. And as the first, distant howls reverberated through the night, a cliffhanger of fate sealed my resolve. I would break free, no matter the cost. The blue moon's release. In the hush of midnight, the full silver moon began its slow, mysterious transformation. It was as if the heavens themselves were whispering secrets to the earth. Its pale glow deepened, and gradually, an ethereal, blue shimmer crept along its edges. The change was both subtle and profound, a quiet magic unfolding before my eyes, washing the dark sky in a mesmerizing hue of sapphire and indigo. Every shift of light seemed to carry a promise, a silent vow of change, as though the moon were offering a rare chance at liberation. At that very moment, a shiver of anticipation ran through me as I realized the cages, those cold silver prisons that had held me captive, were beginning to tremble. One by one, the heavy, unyielding locks clicked open with an almost musical cadence, the sound mingling with the soft rustle of the night breeze. It was as if the entire world held its breath, in that instant, waiting for the final act of this ancient ritual. The barrier that had confined us was crumbling, and the path to freedom was now laid bare under the glowing blue moon. Driven by a sudden burst of adrenaline, I leaped to my feet and pushed against the bars. The cold metal bit into my skin, but I barely felt the sting, for my mind was consumed with hope. With a surge of raw determination, I dashed from the cage. My limbs moved on pure instinct, every muscle straining as I raced towards the beckoning darkness of the forest. Behind me, the clamor of other wolves breaking free filled the air, a cacophony of howls that mingled with the mystical hum of the blue moon overhead. I could feel the cool night air rushing against my face as I burst into the open, leaving the confining echoes of captivity behind. The world outside was wild and untamed, alive with the rustling of leaves and the soft, distant murmur of a nocturnal wilderness that promised both refuge and danger. Every breath I took was heavy with the scent of damp earth, pine, and a whisper of something untold, something both ancient and hopeful. The energy of the moment was intoxicating, a potent mix of terror and the fierce joy of being free, of defying a destiny that had long been imposed on me. Yet, even as I ran, my heart pounded. With a cocktail of exhilaration and dread, I was aware that every step took me deeper into a realm where the rules of our cruel traditions no longer held sway, a realm where I might finally reclaim the humanity that had been wrenched away. Still, the thrill of the chase was tempered by the stark realization that the night was not entirely forgiving. Somewhere in the distance, the ominous sounds of the run were beginning to stir, a dark reminder that the very forces I was desperate to escape would soon be closing in. The forest itself loomed before me like a living, breathing entity. Its towering trees, shrouded in silvery mist, beckoned me with both allure and warning. I could hear the soft murmur of the undergrowth and the occasional distant snap of a branch, as if the forest were stirring awake in anticipation. The luminescence of the blue moon created shifting patterns on the forest floor, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to conceal secrets and dangers alike. It was a realm of contrasts, mysterious beauty intertwined with a palpable sense of foreboding. My every instinct urged me to keep moving, to find a safe haven amid the chaotic wilderness before the full force of the run could overtake me. With each frantic step, I could feel the cold grip of fate lurking just beyond the next bend in the path. My heart pounded louder, a steady reminder of the ticking clock that governed our lives. I knew that time was a luxury I could ill afford. The roar of the unleashed pack, the ruthless determination of those still shackled to fate, would soon crescendo into a chaos I might not escape. And so, with the magic of the blue moon illuminating my path and the promise of freedom shimmering like a distant beacon, I plunged deeper into the forest. Every shadow, every rustle in the underbrush, heightened my awareness. I ran with the hope that I might find refuge, a moment of respite where I could catch my breath and gather strength. But even as the forest swallowed me whole, a lingering question echoed in my mind. Would I find shelter before the relentless dangers of the run closed in? Or was my journey into this wild unknown just the beginning of a deeper, more perilous struggle? The chaotic assembly. As I pressed deeper into the wilderness, the forest gave way to a clearing, the starting area for the run, a chaotic gathering that pulsed with raw energy and desperation. The scene was a frenzied mix of wolves, mateless, females with eyes filled with defiant sorrow, and aggressive males whose snarls and barks sliced through the still night air. It was as if the clearing itself had become a crucible for our fate, where tradition and rebellion collided in a symphony of primal sound. In the midst of the turmoil, the atmosphere was electric, charged with a volatile cocktail of hostility, anticipation, and despair. Every face told a story of suffering and determination. Every stance was both a challenge and a plea for liberation. I could sense the tension radiating from the pack like a tangible force, an undercurrent that promised both peril and the possibility of change. Amid the cacophony, several figures stood out. There was the enigmatic silver wolf, her fur shimmering under the blue moon's glow, a silent beacon of both strength and mystery. Her eyes, cool and calculating, betrayed a lifetime of hardship tempered by an inner resolve that seemed almost otherworldly. She moved gracefully among the chaos, her presence commanding respect without uttering a single word. Nearby, I caught sight of Amelia, a timid but fiercely determined wolf, whose quiet gaze belied the strength within her. Though she appeared hesitant, at first, the steely determination in her eyes spoke volumes. Amelia's posture was one of careful resilience, as if she were silently vowing to overcome the brutal fate imposed upon us. Her presence reminded me that even in the darkest moments, a spark of hope could persist. As I surveyed the assembly, my inner turmoil surged anew. A deep longing for genuine love, a love chosen freely and nurtured in tenderness, warred with the brutal traditions that had defined our existence for generations. Forced mating was not just a ritual, it was a chain that bound us to a legacy of pain and subjugation. I yearned for a future where affection and companionship were matters of the heart, not dictated by the cold dictates of our forebears. This internal conflict pulsed with every heartbeat, a constant reminder of the price of defiance and the struggle to reclaim our humanity. The air was thick with murmurs of anxiety and quiet rebellion. Aggressive males barked challenges at the females, while some mateless wolves eyed each other with both hope and despair. The mix of emotions was overwhelming. The fierce clamor of those who embraced the savage order collided with soft, nearly imperceptible sighs of resistance, a silent chorus of those who believed that change was possible. In that volatile environment, alliances were as unpredictable as the shifting winds. A subtle glance here, a whispered word there, hinted at secret pacts that might one day upend the established order. As I moved through the clearing, I couldn't shake the feeling that not everything was as it seemed. Beneath the visible hostility and raw power, a delicate web of loyalties and betrayals lay hidden. Some wolves, whose eyes seemed to dart nervously, between the crowd, might harbor ambitions beyond the brute force of tradition. I saw hints of clandestine alliances, murmurs of a revolution against the old ways, and subtle signs of secret sympathy for those longing for something different, a life where love was not sacrificed at the altar of power. The clearing was alive with conflicting signals. While a few wolves fought openly against the ritual's demand, others appeared resigned, almost hypnotized by the relentless pressure of their fate. Even within the ranks of the aggressive males, I detected a glimmer of uncertainty, a crack in the veneer of cruelty. It was as if the brutal order that had been imposed upon us was beginning to fray at the edges, exposing the human longing that lay buried beneath the animalistic exterior. Amid this tumult, my mind swirled with questions. Could it be that these wolves, bound by the same oppressive traditions, secretly harbored dreams of freedom? Were there forces at work, alliances forged in the shadows, that might one day shatter the cycle of forced mating? Each step I took through the chaotic assembly deepened my resolve and intensified the internal battle raging within me. I longed not only to escape the confines of my own fate, but also to inspire a revolution of the heart among my brethren. As the night deepened and the sounds of restless discontent grew louder, I sensed that the run was imminent. The tension was nearly palpable, a storm of raw emotion waiting to erupt. I stood at the center of this chaotic congregation, feeling both the weight of my destiny and the spark of an unyielding hope. The choices that lay ahead were shrouded in uncertainty, and every glance, every whispered word among the pack hinted at possibilities that defied the brutal norms we had long endured. In that moment, my heart pounded with a fierce determination, a promise to fight for a future where love and freedom could coexist, and where the ancient chains of tradition might finally be broken. Yet as I surveyed the restless faces around me, a chilling thought crept into my mind. In this wild, chaotic assembly, alliances could be as treacherous as they were promising. And with that thought lingering like a specter, I knew that the true test of my resolve was only just beginning. A glimpse of Lady Silver, in the midst of the chaotic assembly, where desperation and aggression swirled like a maelstrom, she appeared, an ethereal vision among the tumult. Lady Silver. Her presence was like a sudden, serene lull in the storm, of raw, primal energy. With fur that shimmered like moonlit mercury, she moved with a grace that defied the harshness of our brutal traditions. Every step she took was measured, as if she were dancing to a silent melody that only she could hear. In her eyes burned a quiet determination, a flicker of defiance that shone amidst the overwhelming gloom. I found myself transfixed. My heart, already burdened with the weight of my own fate, skipped a beat as I beheld her. There was an inexplicable allure in the way her silver fur caught the blue light of the moon, a luminous glow that set her apart from the rest of the pack. It was as though she carried with her a hidden promise, a hope that perhaps, just perhaps, the cycle of forced mating and unyielding violence could be broken. In her, I saw not just another victim of our cruel customs, but a beacon of possibility, a glimpse of a future where we might reclaim our dignity and freedom. Her gaze briefly met mine across the gathering. For a moment, time seemed to slow, and the chaotic din of the assembly faded into a distant murmur. There was an unspoken understanding in that look, a silent acknowledgement of the shared pain, and the desire for something more than the fate that had been imposed on us. I felt an immediate surge of protectiveness, a deep, almost overwhelming instinct to shield her from the brutal destiny that awaited so many of us. I wanted to reach out, to tell her that there was hope, that together we could defy the ancient rituals that bound our lives in cruelty. Who are you?" I managed to whisper, my voice trembling as if laden with years of suppressed longing. Her response was soft, yet resolute, her tone imbued with a strength that belied her gentle exterior. "I am Lady Silver," she replied simply, as if her name carried the weight of her destiny. But it was more than that. A name that echoed, like a promise in my heart, a promise that there might be a way to break free from the endless cycle of violence and submission. In that brief, charged exchange, I could sense that she was different. There was a vulnerability in her eyes, tempered by an inner fire, a spark that might just ignite a revolution among us. I recalled whispers among the pack of a prophecy, a hint that a wolf with rare silver fur might hold the key to transforming our fate. Though such stories had long been dismissed as mere myth, in that moment, I felt their truth deep in my bones. Perhaps Lady Silver was more than just a symbol of beauty amid despair. Perhaps she was the catalyst we had all been waiting for, living embodiment of hope. My mind raced as I took in every detail, the soft shimmer of her fur, the gentle curve of her features, and the quiet determination that radiated from her. I felt an unyielding pull, an inner vow that I would do everything in my power to protect her. If she could defy the odds and remain unbroken in this brutal world, then maybe there was a chance for us all. In that split second, I made a silent promise to myself. I would help her no matter the cost. I would be her guardian, her shield against the relentless tide of fate that sought to claim us. The murmurs of the crowd around us resumed, the chaotic energy reasserting itself as reality pressed in once more. Yet, in my heart, a new resolve had been kindled. Amid the savage traditions and the relentless brutality, a small, fragile hope now took root, a hope that love could triumph over forced destiny, that compassion could mend the shattered remnants of our humanity. I stepped closer to her, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "I promise, Lady Silver," I said, my tone imbued with raw emotion and fierce determination. "I will do everything in my power to keep you safe. Together we can change this fate, rewrite these cruel traditions that have haunted us for so long." Her eyes, luminous and searching, held mine as if she were weighing the sincerity of my vow. In that moment, I sensed that she too harbored a secret yearning, a desire for something beyond the savage rituals that had defined our lives. Yet, even as I pledged my protection, a quiet question lingered in the recesses of my mind. Would the power of our defiance be enough to break the chains that bound us? And more importantly, could our fragile alliance spark the change that so many of us longed for? As the crowd's energy swelled around us, hinting at unseen alliances and whispered betrayals, I knew that our journey was only just beginning. In that suspended moment, with the weight of destiny pressing down and the glow of the blue moon lighting our path, I vowed that no matter what trials lay ahead, I would stand by Lady Silver. For in her rare and radiant presence, I saw the possibility of a future where love, rather than cruelty, could reign. A future that was now, more than ever, worth fighting for. Encounters. Along the river. The river stretched out before me like a ribbon of silver, winding its way through the heart of the wilderness. I found solace in its gentle murmur as I journeyed along its banks, the cool water reflecting the soft glow of the blue moon overhead. The air was rich with the scent of damp earth and pine needles, mingling with the faint aroma of wildflowers that dared to bloom in the shadow of ancient trees. Every step I took on the pebbled path brought me closer to a world both beautiful and unpredictable. I moved with a measured pace, my mind oscillating between the relentless pursuit of freedom and the tender hope for true love, a love untainted by the cruelty of forced traditions. The river's flow, at once both calm and insistent, mirrored the turbulence within me. Its cool, crisp waters beckoned me forward, whispering promises of renewal and escape. Yet, as the gentle lapping of water against stone provided brief moments of solace, a more insidious presence lurked in the distance. At intervals, the serene rhythm of nature was shattered by sudden, sharp movements. Rival wolves, driven by their own brutal mandates, emerged from the shadows to give chase. Their snarls cut through the night, echoing with hostility and desperation. In one breathless moment, I found myself sprinting along the riverbank, the sound of pounding paws and harsh barks driving me onward. I could feel my pulse quicken as I dodged between clusters of ferns and over slick stones, the water splashing around my feet like a hurried symphony. During these frenzied bursts of flight, my heart pounded, not only with fear, but also with a bittersweet longing. In every desperate stride, I recalled the tender hope that had ignited within me, the possibility of a future where I could claim love on my own terms, unburdened by the savagery that had long dictated our fate. The thrill of the chase intermingled with quiet moments of introspection as I paused by the river's edge to catch my breath. There, amidst the rustling reeds and the soft murmur of the current, I allowed my thoughts to wander. I wondered if, beyond the endless cycle of violence and submission, there was a place where hearts could heal and dreams might take flight. The duality of my existence was laid bare in these reflective pauses. I was a creature torn between the wild, untamed spirit of a werewolf and the fragile, yearning soul of a human longing for connection. I savored the thought of gentle embraces and whispered promises, a love that could mend the fractures left by the harsh customs of our pack. Yet, each time I closed my eyes to that vision, the sharp reality of the run intruded upon my reverie. I knew all too well that danger was never far behind in these wild lands, and that every moment of introspection was punctuated by the threat of violence. As the river meandered further into the dark heart of the forest, the scenery transformed. The gentle murmur of the water grew into a low, almost ominous hum as it rushed over rocky outcrops and cascaded into hidden pools. The silver surface of the river became choppy and restless, reflecting not only the shifting sky above, but also the tumult of the world beyond. Every ripple, every eddy, carried a hint of foreboding, as though the river itself were warning of imminent peril. I pressed forward, my senses on high alert. The cool spray of the water on my face and the earthy perfume of the forest filled my lungs, yet beneath it all lay an undercurrent of tension, a subtle, unplaceable sound that whispered of a presence lurking far upstream. I strained my ears against the cacophony of rustling leaves and distant howls, searching for a sign, a clue that could unravel the mystery of this foreboding murmur. In one ambiguous moment, as I paused on a narrow bend where the river curved into a shadowed cove, the sound grew distinct, a low, rhythmic pulse that was not the familiar rush of water, nor the frantic cries of chasing wolves. It was something else entirely, something ancient and unsettling. My heart stuttered in my chest as I leaned closer to the water's edge, eyes narrowing in the darkness. The unknown presence seemed to call out from upstream, a spectral echo in the wilderness that promised both danger and perhaps a secret, key to my own fate. In that tense moment, with the river's turbulent flow as my only companion, I felt the full weight of the world converge upon me. Every instinct, every fiber of my being, screamed to flee, yet the mysterious sound held me captive, a siren call that defied explanation. I knew that if I did not heed its warning, the dangers of the run could overtake me, shattering the fragile hope that still burned within my soul. And so, as the murmur of the ominous presence grew louder, I gripped the cool stone beneath my hand, my eyes fixed on the dark water that carried its secret message. I wondered if this eerie call was a final warning or a twisted promise of what lay ahead. With my heart pounding in my ears, I took a deep breath and steeled myself for the unknown, knowing that the next moments could change everything. The dread of the ragers, a sinister tension crept over the forest as the distant feral howls grew louder, a prelude to a threat that sent shivers down my spine. In our world, there existed a breed of wolves known as the ragers. These were not ordinary members of the pack. They were rogue, untethered to the brutal order we all dreaded. Their nature was ruthless, driven by an insatiable hunger for power and dominance, and they cared nothing for the age-old rituals that defined our existence. In their eyes burned a wild, unyielding fire, a cold, remorseless fury that promised to tear apart any semblance of order. As I ran along the riverbank, Every step heavy with both hope and fear, my thoughts turned to the ragers. I remembered the grim whispers among the pack, stories of wolves who had abandoned all restraint, who roamed free with a brutal, unrestrained savagery. These creatures were the antithesis of what we had once believed in, and their emergence threatened to shatter the delicate balance that still clung to our fading humanity. I glanced over at Lady Silver, whose rare, shimmering fur was a beacon in the darkness, and at Amelia, whose determined yet gentle eyes spoke of quiet resilience. The thought of these two, so full of hope in a world consumed by forced traditions, spurred a fierce protective instinct within me. I could not, would not, allow the ragers to claim our fragile future, or to bring harm to those I had vowed to protect. The air around me seemed to thicken with dread, as I recalled the last time I had encountered these renegades. Their savage roars and the thunder of their pounding paws echoed through the forest like a harbinger of doom. They were merciless hunters, driven by a primal rage that knew no boundaries. Unlike the disciplined order of our pack, the ragers cared only for chaos, their savage minds fixated on seizing control by any means necessary. Their appearance heralded a descent into carnage, a violent uprising against everything our traditions stood for. I could almost see them now in the periphery of my vision, shadowy figures moving with a predatory grace, eyes glinting with lethal intent. Each moment that passed intensified my anxiety. Every whisper of wind and rustle of leaves became a reminder that these rogue wolves might be drawing nearer, ready to unleash their fury upon us at any second. In the quiet intervals between desperate sprints along the river, my mind churned with plans of defense. I envisioned a barricade of alliances, a way to harness our collective strength to repel the onslaught of the ragers. I thought of strategies, of secret meeting spots, of how we might outsmart these unbridled forces. Every thought was laced with the urgency of survival and the desire to protect Lady Silver and Amelia, whose gentle souls deserved a future free from such ruthless violence. The forest, usually a haven of whispered secrets and soft nocturnal melodies, now seemed to pulse with an ominous rhythm. The sound of the river, once a soothing lullaby, took on a harsh, discordant tone. My heart pounded, matching the erratic beat of my thoughts, a relentless drum of fear and resolve. I knew that if the ragers closed in on us, there would be no retreat, only a brutal clash where our very survival hung in the balance. Every instinct in me screamed that the time for confrontation was near. The prospect of a direct clash with these wild, unrestrained wolves was terrifying, yet it ignited a defiant fire in my soul. I recalled the legacy of our pack, the discipline, the pain, and the hope for change that had been passed down through generations. I could not let the ragers undo everything we had fought for, nor could I stand by and let the brutal legacy of forced mating continue unchecked. As the night deepened, the cacophony of the forest grew louder, punctuated by the occasional snapping of a branch and the low, ominous murmur of the wind. Then, in a moment of terrifying clarity, I heard it, a sound distinct from the natural symphony of the wilderness. It was the heavy, deliberate beat of footsteps, far too steady to be the erratic padding of an animal in flight. My pulse spiked as the sound grew nearer, each step resonating with the promise of an impending clash. I paused for a heartbeat, the weight of the moment anchoring me to the spot. The eerie silence that followed was a stark contrast to the earlier chaos, a pregnant pause filled with both dread and determination. I could feel my blood racing as I strained my ears, trying to decipher the distance and direction of these approaching steps. Was it a single wolf, or an entire group? The answer did not matter as much as the undeniable truth that danger was closing in. In that suspended moment, with the forest enveloping me in its cold, foreboding embrace, I steeled myself for the inevitable confrontation. My mind was a whirlwind of strategies and desperate hope, every thought focused on the safety of Lady Silver and Amelia, and the promise of a future where the savage traditions would be overthrown. I knew that the encounter with the Ragers would test every ounce of my strength and resolve, and the outcome would shape the very destiny of our pack. And then, as if in response to my silent plea for vigilance, the sound of those heavy footsteps grew louder, imminent and inexorable. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the only sound now the pounding of my own heart, as I braced for what was coming next. Clash at the waterfall. The roar of cascading water thundered in my ears as we approached the waterfall, a natural coliseum set in the heart of the dark forest. The force of the falling water created a fine, icy mist that stung my face and blurred the edges of the surrounding trees. It was here, amid the raw power of nature, that the Ragers finally ambushed us. The turbulent spray, the relentless roar, and the echoing clash of metal against stone melded into a chaotic symphony that mirrored the turmoil raging within me. I glanced at my allies, Lady Silver, with her luminous silver fur that glowed against the murk of night, and Amelia, whose determined eyes shone with both fear and fierce resolve. Together, we had prepared for this moment, knowing that the brutal clash was inevitable. Yet, even as we steeled ourselves for battle, an unsettling mix of adrenaline and dread pulsed through every nerve. We were on the precipice of a confrontation that would decide more than just our survival. It would shape the fate of our pack. Without warning, the Ragers burst forth from the thicket, their feral eyes ablaze with raw, unrestrained fury. Their snarls cut through the roar of the waterfall, their teeth bared in vicious anticipation. In that split second, time seemed to slow, and every sensory detail, the chill of the mist, the rough texture of water-slicked rocks underfoot, the metallic tang of fear, became magnified. I launched myself into the fray. My muscles surged with the desperate energy of survival as I dodged between the falling torrents and lunged at the first Rager that came too close. The cold spray of water, mixed with the adrenaline burning in my veins, intensifying the fierce clarity of every movement. The chaotic ballet of claws and teeth unfolded with brutal precision, each strike, each parry, resonating with both primal ferocity and the lingering echoes of our lost humanity. In the midst of the onslaught, I caught sight of Lady Silver moving, with a graceful urgency, her eyes scanning for any sign of weakness in our attackers. Amelia, though smaller in stature, fought with a courage that belied her gentle demeanor, her agile form darting to intercept a vicious swipe. Each ally fought not only for their own life, but for the promise of a future free from the oppressive customs that had chained us for so long. My inner voice roared louder than the waterfall itself. Amid the blinding spray and the cacophony of battle, I battled with my own tumultuous emotions. I was torn between the sheer instinct to survive and the burning desire to protect those who meant everything to me. Every gritted tooth, every desperate cry, was laced with the resolve to defy a destiny that had been cruelly imposed upon us. I could feel my heart pounding, a relentless drumbeat that urged me to stand my ground, even as the chaos threatened to swallow us whole. The water crashed around us, sending sprays of liquid shards into the air like glittering bullets. I ducked beneath the torrent, only to emerge and meet the savage gaze of an enemy Rager. In that split moment, our eyes locked. A fleeting collision of untamed fury and deep, unyielding determination. I struck with all my might, the force of my blow reverberating against the sheer rock face. Yet the enemy's relentless assault pushed me back, a stark reminder that survival was never guaranteed. The battle raged on. Every second felt like an eternity of pain, hope, and defiance. I parried a vicious swipe from one Rager, only to feel the searing sting of a claw scraping against my side. The pain was sharp and immediate, but it only fueled my determination further. I recalled every agonizing memory of our past, the forced shifts, the caging, the cold commands, and with each recalled moment, my will to fight grew stronger. I would not let this moment, this brutal clash, be the end of who I truly was. Then, As the water's relentless cascade blurred the line between friend and foe, I found myself facing a pivotal moment. Around me, the ragers pressed in with an almost preternatural coordination, their movements a violent dance of survival. I stood at a crossroads, my breath coming in ragged gasps as the icy mist clung to my skin, and the roar of the waterfall hammered the urgency into every fiber of my being. A critical decision loomed on the horizon, a moment suspended in time where the outcome of this fierce encounter would depend on a single desperate choice. Would I press forward, risking everything to break their vicious hold, or retreat momentarily to regroup and plan another strike? The murmur of the waterfall seemed to echo my inner conflict, a powerful reminder that every action in this life and death battle carried monumental consequences. In that heart-stopping moment, as the clash of steel and sinew resonated through the air and the turbulent water roared its unyielding song, I knew that the next decision would be the turning point. The fate of my friends, the future of our pack, and the promise of a world where love could triumph over brutality all hung in the balance. And with that thought echoing in the relentless rhythm of the falling water, I braced myself for the next move, uncertain of what lay ahead, but resolute in my determination to defy fate. The Price of Defiance. The battle left its brutal signature on my soul, a grim testament to the cost of challenging fate. Amid the raging chaos of clashing bodies and savage snarls, I found myself locked in a relentless struggle, not only against the physical force of our enemies, but also against the deep-seated demons that had haunted me since childhood. Every clash of my claws against the snarling ragers was a jarring reminder of the ancient curses that bound us, a violent symphony of raw defiance and the price it demanded. In the midst of the skirmish, time warped into a series of unyielding rhythmic moments. The rush of adrenaline made my heart beat a steady drumbeat as I lunged at a particularly ferocious rager, a beast whose eyes burned with unrestrained fury. My muscles tensed and released in fluid motions, each strike a desperate bid to carve out a fragment of hope from the chaos. But every blow I landed was met with a counterattack that sliced through my flesh and spirit alike. The cool, bitter sting of blood mingled with the acrid taste of sweat as I staggered backward, my body trembling under the relentless assault. Even as I fought with all the defiance I possessed, a darker truth gnawed at me from within. Amid the visceral violence, memories of past betrayals surfaced. Of the night my closest friend was torn away by the very pack I had sworn to protect. That loss, sudden and searing, had left a wound that no amount of ferocity could ever heal. I recalled, the terrified cry echoing in my ears, a sound that had haunted me ever since. It was a betrayal by those I trusted, a moment when the brutal traditions that we lived by had claimed more than just our freedom. They had stolen a part of our very humanity. Each furious encounter on that blood-slicked battlefield was punctuated by the agony of that loss. As I exchanged blows with a rager, whose ferocity matched the tempest within me, I could feel the weight of my own despair pressing down. The duality of my existence, the beast and the human locked in eternal conflict, became a mirror for the tumult outside. I fought not only for survival, but for the memory of what had been lost, for the fragile hope that someday love and compassion might mend the shattered remnants of our world. The rhythmic cacophony of battle merged with the haunting echoes of my inner demons. In one particularly savage moment, a rager lunged with a force that sent me crashing into a jagged boulder. Pain exploded through my side, and I felt my vision blur with the searing sting of blood. As I struggled to rise, a wave of bitter realization washed over me. Each act of defiance exacted its own price, leaving scars not just on my flesh but on the very core of my being. The thought threatened to overwhelm me with despair, yet in that darkness, a spark of determination ignited. I forced myself to push forward, every step a defiant act against the forces that sought to break me. My mind screamed with the memories of betrayal and loss, but it also whispered of a future where these brutal traditions might finally be overturned. Every bruise, every wound became a badge of my commitment, a testament to the bitter resolve that fueled my fight for change. I looked around at the carnage and realized that, though I was battered and bleeding, I was still standing. I was still the one who refused to be tamed by a fate written in cruelty. Yet, even as the battle wore on, the fallout of each violent encounter left me questioning if I possessed the strength to truly alter this grim destiny. The physical torment was matched only by the emotional cost. With each agonizing blow, the ancient chains of our heritage seemed to tighten, threatening to drag me back into the depths of despair. In the chaos, I caught sight of a fallen ally. Once a comrade who had shared my dreams of liberation, now lying motionless among the trampled leaves and shattered hopes. That sight was a stark reminder that defiance came at a staggering price. In a rare, heart-stopping lull, I paused amid the tumult. The world around me slowed to a haunting, almost surreal silence. I knelt on the rain-slicked ground, pressing my hand to the wound in my side, feeling the warm trickle of blood as it mixed with the cold night air. My eyes burned with both pain and a steely resolve. I knew that if I were to break these chains of barbarity, I would have to risk everything. My body, my soul, and the remnants of my shattered past. But could I truly change a destiny that had been carved in the darkness for generations? The question echoed in the stillness, a bitter refrain that resonated with every heartbeat. Was my defiance enough to overturn the relentless tide of fate, or was I doomed to become just another casualty in this brutal cycle? The weight of that doubt was nearly overwhelming, yet within it, I also found a spark, a fierce, unyielding determination that refused to be snuffed out by the cruelty of our existence. I rose to my feet, casting a steely gaze over the carnage that surrounded me. The world was a maelstrom of violence and loss, but in the depths of my pain, I vowed that I would not surrender. I would fight for every fragment of love and freedom that still flickered in the hearts of my allies, and I would do so no matter the cost. With the bitter taste of betrayal still fresh on my tongue, and the memory of fallen friends urging me on, I prepared for the next wave of chaos. In that suspended moment, as the night's bitter chill mingled with the warmth of my resolve, I whispered, a vow to the darkness. I would forge a future free from the shackles of our cursed traditions, even if it meant battling every demon, both within and without. And with that, I turned back to the fray, the question of my fate lingering in the bond. A question that would define not only my path, but the very soul of our pack. Moments of tenderness. Amid chaos, in the heart of the chaos, when the world around us still burned with the fury of battle, a rare moment of quiet intimacy broke through like a soft whisper amid a raging storm. As the clamor of clashing paws and snarling adversaries receded into a distant murmur, Lady Silver and I found ourselves drawn together by an irresistible pull, a fragile yet undeniable connection that spoke of hope and tenderness. We slipped away to a secluded alcove behind, a curtain of cascading vines, a hidden sanctuary in the midst of relentless turmoil. There, under the pale glow of the blue moon, her luminous silver fur seemed to shimmer like stardust, casting a gentle light over her serene face. In that vulnerable moment, the harsh lines of our brutal existence softened, and the echoes of violence faded into a quiet, shared silence. The cool night air caressed our skin, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed to pause, allowing us to exist solely for each other. "Are you all right?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper, laden with concern that reached deep into my battered soul. I could see in her eyes the same blend of determination and quiet sorrow that had haunted me for so long. Her hand, delicate yet unwavering, reached out to rest against mine, a silent promise of comfort amid the storm. I squeezed her hand gently in return, grateful for that touch that reminded me of our shared humanity. I am I murmured, though my voice carried the weight of countless battles fought and lost. I've known only chaos for too long, but with you, even a moment like this brings me back to life. Her gaze softened, and for a moment, the brutal reality of our lives was forgotten. Instead, we lingered in the intimacy of our connection, a tender respite that spoke of something much greater than survival. In that fleeting space, the world around us melted away, leaving only the quiet pulse of our hearts in sync. We talked in hushed tones about dreams that felt almost impossible in the wake of such relentless violence. She confided her secret wish for a future where our kind could embrace love without the shadow of forced traditions looming over every moment. I listened, mesmerized, as her words painted a picture of a life free from the harsh dictates of our past. A life where the beauty of genuine affection could triumph over the relentless cruelty imposed upon us. Between soft exchanges, I found myself opening up about the deep scars that marred my soul, the betrayals, the losses, and the constant unyielding pressure of our destiny. With each word, the layers of hardened defiance slowly gave way to vulnerable honesty. It was as if, in her presence, I could finally allow the part of me that yearned for a different path to breathe freely, even if only for a moment. Yet, even as the tender glow of our newfound closeness illuminated our faces, the reality of our surroundings was never far from our minds. The distant roar of the waterfall, the echo of howls from the ongoing skirmish, and the constant, ominous threat of the ragers served as persistent reminders that danger lurked just beyond our fragile cocoon. Every so often, a chill would run down my spine as I recalled the violent clashes and the looming specter of our brutal fate. In a brief lull between our whispered confidences, Lady Silver's eyes drifted toward the darkness beyond our shelter, as if sensing a disturbance in the night's stillness. "There's something off," she murmured, her tone shifting subtly from tender to cautious. I followed her gaze into the shadows, where the silhouettes of trees danced in the uncertain light, and for a fleeting second, I felt the weight of impending doom. Her hand tightened around mine, and the moment felt suspended, time itself holding its breath. "What do you think it is?" I asked softly, even as an internal alarm surged within me. Her eyes, wide with unspoken worry, flickered with a spark of determination that belied her gentle nature. Before I could respond, a sudden, low vibration resonated through the ground, a sound that was not part of the familiar nocturnal chorus. It was as if the forest itself had detected an anomaly, a disturbance that sent tremors of unease through every living thing. My heart pounded with renewed urgency, and a chill swept over me, despite the closeness we shared. "I don't know," Lady Silver replied, her voice barely audible over the soft murmur of the wind. "But it feels like something is coming." Her words, laden with both dread and resolve, hung in the air like a fragile warning. In that instant, I knew that our tender reprieve was about to be shattered by an unexpected twist, a disturbance that might upend everything we had so painstakingly built in the midst of chaos. I drew her close, our foreheads touching in a silent vow of protection, as we both listened intently to the unsettling sound. The promise of our connection, however fleeting and delicate, was our beacon in the encroaching darkness. Yet even as I vowed silently to guard her with every ounce of strength, the nagging question remained. What new threat was approaching? And could our fragile peace withstand the storm it heralded? The forest whispered its secrets around us, and in that suspended moment, I realized that our journey was far from over. With our hearts entwined, yet minds on high alert, we braced ourselves for what lay ahead, a future filled with love, danger, and the ever-looming possibility of betrayal. The burden of legacy, in the quiet aftermath of the night's chaos, as the echoes of the run still whispered through the forest, I found myself alone with the relentless burden of my inheritance. The weight of my family's brutal legacy pressed down on me like an unyielding force. In the solitude of the dark, I was left to confront the harsh expectations that had been ingrained in me since birth, a destiny carved out by the savage traditions of my forefathers. My mind drifted back to painful memories that clung to me like scars. I recalled sitting in a cold, shadowed hall, the air heavy with the unspoken judgment of my father's gaze. His eyes, steely and unyielding, had always carried the promise of brutal tradition, a tradition that demanded unwavering obedience and unrelenting strength. I could still hear his gruff, commanding voice echoing in my ears. "You must do what is necessary. Our legacy demands sacrifice, and you will bear the weight of our pack's destiny." Those words had reverberated through my soul, a constant reminder that the path I trod was not one of my choosing, but one imposed upon me by blood and duty. Every time I thought of that day, a fresh surge of anger and sorrow coursed through me. The memory of my father's stern expression, the harsh lines of disappointment etched into his face, made me feel both insignificant and defiant. I recalled the time he dismissed my dreams of love and freedom, telling me that emotions were luxuries, unfit for a wolf destined to rule. The betrayal stung deeply. Not only did he impose these cruel expectations, but he also shunned the very notion that I could have a heart capable of tenderness. My cousin Felix, ever the embodiment of ruthless ambition, only deepened the wound, his ambitions driving him to undermine any hint of compassion within our family. As these memories unfolded, I felt the dichotomy within me grow more pronounced. There was an instinct, a raw, animalistic drive that had always compelled me to obey the brutal traditions, to uphold our pack's order. Yet, interwoven with that primal call was a softer, more human longing, a desire for genuine connection, for love that was chosen rather than enforced. I was torn between rebellion and belonging, between the fierce desire to forge my own destiny and the crushing weight of my inherited role. Each recollection, every harsh word from my father, served as a reminder that my life was not mine to shape but a vessel to carry forward an archaic, merciless code. The threat of losing my title loomed like a specter over my every thought. In our world, power was measured by one's willingness to conform to tradition, and deviation was met with swift, unforgiving retribution. I could almost feel the eyes of the pack upon me, their silent judgment a constant pressure to conform to expectations. To rebel was to risk not only my own soul, but the very future of our kind. And yet, the promise of a different path, a path where love and freedom reigned, whispered to me, persistent and alluring, in the depths of my being. In moments of solitude, I would wander through the shadows of my mind, questioning whether I could ever reconcile the two halves of my nature. Was it possible to be both a fierce, commanding leader and a compassionate soul who craved connection? My heart ached with the desire to break free from the chains of tradition, to upend the brutal rituals that had defined our existence for generations. But the more I dreamed of change, the more I felt the crushing inevitability of my legacy. A legacy that had been etched in violence and subjugation by those who came before me. Standing on the precipice of destiny, I vowed to myself that I would no longer be a silent victim of fate. I would challenge the old ways, even if it meant standing alone against the tide of tradition. I would fight for a future where love was a right, not a forced duty, where our pack could thrive on compassion and mutual respect rather than on cruelty and dominance. Every memory of pain, every echo of my father's harsh decrees, only steeled my resolve further. With the cool night air swirling around me and the distant sounds of the forest acting as a somber chorus, I made a solemn promise. I would change things, for myself, for Lady Silver, for Amelia, and for every member of our pack shackled by the weight of our brutal heritage. I would be the catalyst that shattered the old order, the spark that ignited a revolution in our blood-stained history. Yet, even as I resolved to defy destiny, the question remained, could I truly alter the course of a fate so deeply rooted in our being? Would my defiance be enough to break the chains of our ancestors, or was I destined to become yet another casualty of a relentless, unyielding tradition? The uncertainty of the future gnawed at me, a persistent reminder of the uphill battle that lay ahead. As the stars bore silent witness to my inner turmoil, I stepped forward, every step imbued with bitter determination and cautious hope. My mind was set on reshaping our legacy, a legacy of brutality into one of choice, of compassion, and of true leadership. But the path was fraught with peril, and only time would reveal if I had the strength to change the destiny that had been carved in darkness. The final sprint to the lodge, under the cloak of the deepening night, every heartbeat thudded like a drum of urgency as I raced along the forest trail toward the distant lodge. The cold air whipped past me, carrying with it the scent of pine and wet earth, each inhalation a reminder that freedom and survival awaited beyond the shadows. The path was rugged and unpredictable, illuminated only by the occasional flicker of moonlight filtering through dense foliage. Every step was a precarious dance between hope and desperation. The landscape shifted rapidly as I hurtled forward, my senses honed to every subtle movement. Behind me, the relentless howls of rival wolves echoed through the woods, a grim reminder of the dangers that lurked in every dark crevice. I had barely a moment to catch my breath when a burst of movement caught my eye. A pair of rival wolves, eyes glistening with predatory intent, emerged from the underbrush. Their snarls rumbled like distant thunder as they closed in, and I could feel their feral energy chasing me through the cold night. I pushed my legs to the limit, the terrain, blurring into a rush of dark silhouettes and jagged rocks. My pulse raced as I navigated the narrow, winding trail, every step a test of both my physical endurance and my unwavering determination. The tension in my body was matched only by the intensity of the inner hope that surged through me. A hope that despite the relentless threat of the run and the violent forces arrayed against me, I would reach the sanctuary of the lodge and shield my allies from further harm. At one particularly treacherous bend, I nearly lost my footing on slick, moss-covered stones. I managed to catch myself, but the near fall sent a surge of adrenaline that sharpened my focus even further. The forest around me seemed alive with a chaotic symphony. The rustle of leaves, the soft patter of my own racing feet, and the distant, menacing cries of those who sought to claim our fate. The sense of urgency was palpable. Every moment weighted with both peril and the possibility of salvation. I could still feel the sting of recent battles, the bruises on my arms, and the echo of each ferocious encounter reverberating in my mind. Yet, with each determined stride, I recalled the promise I had made: to defy the cruel traditions that bound us, and to fight for a future built on love and freedom. That promise propelled me forward, even as the night grew darker and the path more treacherous. The sound of rushing water from a nearby stream mingled with the cries of my pursuers, a constant reminder of the life force that both nurtured and threatened us. I sprinted past a thicket of trees where the moonlight played over gnarled roots and mossy trunks, each flash of light revealing brief glimpses of rival wolves silhouetted against the night sky. Their relentless pursuit was as much a part of this nocturnal ballet as the whisper of the wind and the murmur of the stream. I could sense that every step drew me closer to the sanctuary of the lodge, a beacon of safety amid the chaos. Just as my exhaustion began to creep in, a flicker of warm light emerged in the distance, a promise of refuge amid the darkness. The lodge, with its soft, welcoming glow, seemed to beckon me with open arms, a final safe haven where I could finally catch my breath and strategize the next move. My heart surged with a blend of relief and renewed determination as the familiar outline of the structure came into view. I could almost feel the comforting presence of my allies, their hopes intertwined with mine, urging me onward. Yet, as I neared the threshold of safety, a sudden, jarring sound shattered the momentary relief. A low, foreboding growl that did not belong to any wolf I recognized. It reverberated through the still night, sending a chill deep into my bones. My instincts screamed that danger was not yet behind me, that some unforeseen threat lay in wait just outside the sanctuary of the lodge's light. My pace faltered as I froze, listening intently to the ominous sound, a sound that hinted at a presence both unexpected and perilous. Was it a rival pack drawn by our commotion, or something even more sinister lurking in the darkened edges of the forest? The question hung in the air, unresolved and potent, as the glow of the lodge shone invitingly ahead, juxtaposed against the encroaching shadows that whispered of imminent danger. In that suspended moment, caught between the promise of sanctuary and the lurking menace of the unknown, I braced myself for what was to come. Every fiber of my being urged me to run forward, yet a quiet, relentless dread told me that this final sprint might be only the beginning of another, even more daunting, challenge. Betrayals and unspoken truths. In the aftermath of the frantic sprint toward the lodge, as the adrenaline slowly subsided into a tense, heavy silence, the true nature of our pack began to reveal itself in whispers and wary glances. The clearing near the lodge transformed from a battlefield into a confessional chamber of secrets. I found myself surrounded by familiar faces, yet their expressions no longer held only determination and camaraderie. They were tainted with suspicion, regret, and something darker. Hidden truths waiting to be unraveled. "Did you see how Felix eyed you during the chase?" whispered one of the younger wolves as we gathered in a huddled circle, the flickering light of a makeshift fire casting uncertain shadows on their faces. His question, though soft, struck a chord deep within me. I knew that behind the veneer of unity, the pack was fracturing under the weight of old rivalries and new betrayals. I leaned against the rough bark of a nearby tree, my gaze drifting over the assembled faces. Lady Silver's luminous eyes, usually so full of calm defiance, now shimmered with a trace of hurt. Amelia, too, held a guarded expression, her features betraying the stress of recent events. The undercurrent of tension was palpable, a silent storm gathering beneath the surface, threatening to break loose at any moment. "It's not just about the chase," I murmured, my voice low and laden with an emotion I could barely contain. "There are things in our past we haven't spoken about. Lies, deceptions, betrayals that still haunt us." The words hung in the air, and for a heartbeat, the fire's crackle was the only sound filling the void. One of the elder wolves, his face lined with the scars of many battles, both physical and emotional, stepped forward. "Your father's legacy isn't as pure as you believe, Caden," he said quietly, his tone heavy with unspoken history. "There were secrets, decisions made in the dark that led to the fractures we now suffer." His words struck like a blow, and in that moment, I felt the familiar sting of a betrayal I'd long suppressed. The past, my father's ruthless ambition, the cruel expectations he imposed, had always been a specter in the back of my mind. Now, as murmurs of long-hidden truths emerged, the air seemed to crackle with a dangerous energy. Another wolf, younger, but with a piercing, honest gaze, interjected, "We've all wondered about the loyalty of some within our ranks. Who among us wears a mask of obedience while plotting behind closed doors?" His question was sharp, almost accusatory, and it sent a ripple of unease through the group. I felt my own pulse quicken as suspicion flared like wildfire. Could it be that even those I trusted had harbored secrets? My mind raced with images of false smiles, clandestine meetings, and whispered promises made in the dead of night. Lady Silver finally spoke, her voice soft yet resolute. "There's been talk. Rumors that some of us have been deceiving the pack, that our identities might not be what they seem. I've seen those eyes, hiding something, betraying loyalties, not their own." Her words were a quiet revelation, each syllable laced with pain and resolve. I exchanged a troubled look with Amelia, who seemed equally shaken by the implication. The conversation spiraled into rapid dialogue and reflective pauses, as accusations were subtly woven into our shared history. The air became charged with emotional tension. Each admission, each denial, adding another layer of complexity to a legacy that had already borne too much sorrow. I felt as if I were caught in a web of intrigue, where the bonds of kinship were strained by the weight of unspoken truths. In every furtive glance and hesitant nod, the betrayal of a trusted friend or kin loomed ominously. "Who can we really trust?" I finally asked, my voice echoing against the quiet murmur of the group. The question was not just for the assembled wolves. It was a question I asked myself repeatedly as I struggled to reconcile my desire for change with the tangled loyalties of our pack. The words felt like a plea, desperate and raw, reverberating in the still night. Before anyone could answer, a sudden sharp noise from deep within the forest cut through the charged silence. A branch snapping, accompanied by the unmistakable sound of footsteps. My eyes widened as I saw movement among the trees, indistinct yet ominous. The unexpected sound jolted everyone into immediate alertness. Whispers ceased, and even the crackle of the fire seemed to pause in anticipation. In that heart-stopping moment, as every wolf tensed for a possible attack, I was left with a chilling cliffhanger. Was this the work of an infiltrator, a traitor, among us, or perhaps the prelude to a more sinister assault? The uncertainty was a knife edge, leaving me and the rest of the pack questioning who among us might truly be an ally, and who was concealing a darker agenda. As the sounds drew nearer, the once familiar faces around the fire now appeared enigmatic, their true intentions hidden behind guarded expressions. My resolve hardened, and I silently vowed that no matter what revelations came to light, I would not let our legacy of betrayal and deception define us. Yet the question still lingered, echoing in the cold night air. In a pack rife with unspoken truths and lurking betrayals, who could you truly trust? The confrontation with the past, in the cold darkness of the forest, the memories I'd long tried to bury resurfaced with a vengeance, merging with the present chaos as I faced not only the snarling threat of the ragers and rival wolves, but also the haunting specters of my own past. The path ahead had become a battleground, a space where every echo of my footsteps seemed to carry the weight of lost time and bitter regret. As I plunged deeper into the fray, the forest erupted in a symphony of conflict. The ragers, wild and unrestrained, charged with relentless ferocity. Their eyes burned with an unyielding hunger for destruction, and their every movement was a brutal reminder of the savage traditions we'd all been forced to endure. I dodged and weaved between their lurching forms, my muscles taut with a mixture of adrenaline and determination. The air crackled with tension, and every clash of fangs and claws against the rough bark of ancient trees echoed like a heartbeat of defiance. Amid the physical struggle, the past invaded me. In the heat of battle, I saw fleeting images of my father, his cold, disapproving eyes, and the crushing weight of his expectations. As if he were there, a ghostly figure reminding me of every harsh command, every moment when I had been forced to accept a fate not of my choosing. Those painful memories stung like fresh wounds, each one a cruel reminder of the legacy I was meant to uphold. Yet, with every strike I delivered, I felt my resolve solidify. I fought not only to survive, but to break the chains of that oppressive inheritance. Lady Silver and Amelia fought at my side, their determination mirroring my own, the fierce glint in Lady Silver's eyes, the quiet courage in Amelia's stance. They were both reminders that our struggle was not merely physical, but also a battle for our very souls. In the midst of the melee, as the ragers circled like vultures waiting for a final opportunity to strike, I channeled the pain of my past into an almost tangible force. Each memory, each accusation and betrayal fueled my strikes, turning grief into raw, unyielding power. I moved with a grace born of necessity, my body and mind working in unison as I parried an attack from a particularly vicious wolf. My heart pounded, echoing the rhythm of an age-old defiance, and I met my opponent head-on. The encounter was a blur of swift, deliberate motions, a cascade of controlled violence that felt both inevitable and transformative. I could almost hear my inner voice, whispering that every moment of agony from the past was forging a new strength within me. The pain was there, yes, but so was a fierce, burning determination to reclaim what had been stolen from us. The right to choose our own destiny. For a brief, suspended moment, the chaos seemed to pause. I found myself standing alone amid the scattering of foes and memories, a solitary figure marked by battle scars and internal triumphs. The flash of past betrayals and the relentless barrage of external enemies had converged into one singular, piercing realization. I was no longer the frightened pup my father once tried to mold. I had grown into a warrior of both flesh and spirit, one who would no longer allow the ghosts of the past to dictate my future. As the battle raged on, my body ached and my limbs trembled, yet I pressed forward with a determined spirit. Every encounter with the Ragers, every clash of wills, reminded me that the cost of defiance was steep, but so too was the reward of liberation. Slowly, the tide of enemies began to recede, their once unrelenting assault faltering in the face of our newfound resolve. With a final, resolute cry, I struck down the last of my attackers, their forms collapsing silently into the shadows of the forest floor. In that heart-stopping moment of victory, a rush of relief mingled with an overwhelming sense of sorrow. I stood amidst the remnants of the confrontation, the air heavy with the scent of blood and the bitter tang of defeat. My allies, though battered and bruised, gathered around me in silent solidarity. The forest, which had borne witness to our struggle, now seemed to hold its breath in a fragile, tentative calm. Yet, even as I savored this hard-won triumph, the cost of our defiance was painfully clear. Every bruise, every wound, was a testament to the sacrifices made in the name of freedom. The memories of my father's harsh words and the betrayal of those who had once shared our dreams lingered like an aftertaste of bitterness. A single, piercing question echoed in the stillness. Was this victory enough to truly change our fate? Could we ever escape the cruel traditions that had defined us for so long? The answer was uncertain, suspended in the chill night air as I surveyed the battlefield. The emotional weight of the past, combined with the tangible scars of the present, left me with more questions than answers. But one thing was undeniable. I had overcome a torrent of both external foes and inner demons, and I had emerged, however, wounded, with a resolve as unyielding as the ancient trees surrounding me. As I gazed into the shadowed distance, where the flicker of distant torches hinted at further challenges yet to come, I vowed silently that the journey was far from over. I would continue to fight, to reclaim love, freedom, and dignity for myself and for our pack. But at that moment, as the moon shone overhead and the forest whispered its secrets, I was left with a final, lingering uncertainty. Could defiance truly rewrite the destiny forged in blood and pain? A glimpse of new leadership. In the wake of our brutal confrontation, a heavy silence slowly descended over the clearing, a silence that spoke of both exhaustion and an emerging, fragile hope. The battlefield, once a maelstrom of chaos and pain, now lay still, the echo of violence lingering in the damp air like a distant, mournful song. As the adrenaline faded, I could sense that something had shifted within our pack. The relentless, brutal order that had defined us for so long seemed to tremble on the verge of collapse. Slowly, one by one, my fellow wolves began to gather around, their eyes no longer solely burning with fury, but reflecting a tentative light, a hope that perhaps a new era was dawning. Lady Silver, her silver fur glistening softly in the moonlight, stood with an air of quiet dignity. Beside her, Amelia, ever the embodiment of gentle determination, offered a small, reassuring nod. Their presence stirred something within me, a shared understanding that our survival had come at a high cost, yet it might also be the catalyst for change. Around the remnants of our makeshift battleground, whispers filled the air like the soft rustling of leaves in a gentle breeze. There were murmurs of discontent and murmurs of possibility. Some wolves spoke in low, hesitant tones of how the ancient, cruel traditions might finally be ready to yield to a more compassionate order, one where leadership was earned through loyalty and strength of character rather than ruthless dominance. An elder wolf, his fur grayed by the passage of time and experience, stepped forward with a solemn expression. "Maybe it's time," he murmured, his voice trembling with both sorrow and hope, "for us to choose a path that honors both our strength and our capacity for kindness." I listened intently as his words resonated among us. In the quiet aftermath, the bitterness of our shared past and the scars from our battles had begun to forge an unspoken pact, a willingness to entertain the possibility of a new kind of leadership, one that could steer us away from the endless cycle of violence. I could see it in the subtle glances exchanged among the pack, in the way even those hardened by brutality now softened their gaze when looking at one another. There was a growing sense of unity, a shared desire to redefine what it meant to be strong. Amid this shifting dynamic, I found moments of tenderness that contrasted sharply with the harshness of the recent conflict. In a quiet corner, a young wolf cradled a wounded comrade, whispering words of solace that spoke of deep loyalty and care. Nearby, Lady Silver sat with her head bowed, tears glistening in her eyes. Not of sorrow alone, but of a profound relief that someone had finally dared to stand up for a future where we were more than just instruments of ancient ritual. These small, intimate scenes of compassion stirred something deep within me, reinforcing the belief that our survival depended not just on brute strength, but on the courage to embrace our vulnerabilities and to care for one another. Yet even as hope began to flicker in the darkness, the cost of our survival was all too evident. The aftermath of the battle was littered with scars, both visible and hidden. I could feel the dull ache of wounds, the weight of each fallen comrade, and the lingering ghost of betrayal that had once threatened to tear us apart. It was a bitter reminder that every step toward change was paid for in blood and sacrifice. As the pack slowly gathered into a more cohesive group, discussions about the future began to take shape. There were those who longed for the old ways, a nostalgia for a time when strength was measured solely by ferocity. But there were others, wolves like me, who saw in the chaos a chance to build something new. I listened as a few of the younger wolves, their voices quivering with a mix of fear and determination, spoke of a new leader who would guide us with wisdom and compassion, rather than cruelty and tyranny. In that charged atmosphere, I felt the stirrings of responsibility. The legacy of our past, heavy with brutal tradition, now seemed like a burden we were determined to shed. I could feel the weight of my own choices, the hope and desperation intermingling within me, urging me to step forward and to be part of the change. My mind swirled with the realization that if we were to break free from the chains of our ancestors, we would need to choose a leader, a figure who could embody both strength and the capacity for renewal. Before long, the hushed murmurs of debate and resolve grew louder, hinting at a pivotal decision looming on the horizon. Whispers spread that a critical council was to be convened, where the fate of our pack would be decided. There was talk of alliances being forged in secret, of old wounds being reopened, and of a promise that the brutal traditions of forced mating might finally be overthrown. I sensed that this was the moment our future hinged upon, a juncture where the hidden truths of our past and the desperate hopes for a better tomorrow would collide. My heart pounded with anticipation and uncertainty as I stood among my kin. The delicate balance between loyalty to the old ways and the irresistible call for change left us all teetering on the brink of a new era. As the flickering light of the fire danced across our weary faces, one question lingered in the charged silence. Who among us could truly lead this transformation? And, more importantly, would we be able to unite our fractured pack in a way that honored both our strength and our capacity for love? Before any definitive words were spoken, a distant howl cut through the night. A sound both mournful and resolute, signaling that the critical moment was drawing near. In that suspended instant, as the weight of our legacy pressed upon us and the promise of new leadership shone like a fragile beacon, I realized that the next decision would change everything. And with that, the future of our pack hung in the balance, leaving us all to wonder who would rise and who would fall when the time came to choose our true leader. The Alpha's final reckoning, under the oppressive gloom of a storm-darkened sky, I finally stood face to face with the embodiment of my darkest legacy. My father, the Alpha, whose iron will had ruled our pack for generations. The clearing, illuminated by a cold, flickering light from torches, became the arena for a confrontation that I had dreaded and long anticipated. Every step I took felt weighted by a lifetime of obedience and unspoken rebellion. And now, at last, I was ready to challenge the tyranny that had enslaved my very soul. "You have grown weak, Caden," my father snarled, his voice echoing with the authority of centuries. His eyes, as unforgiving as the winter frost, bore into mine with a mix of disappointment and cold superiority. "Your path is set. You are to carry on our traditions: force, dominance, and unyielding power. There is no room here for your foolish dreams of love and compassion." I took a deep, steadying breath, feeling the turbulent storm within me mirror the tempest overhead. "I will no longer be shackled by the legacy of brutality," I retorted, my voice clear and resolute. "For too long, I have been forced to accept a fate dictated by cruelty. I refuse to let your tyranny define my future, or the future of our pack." My words hung in the charged air, as heavy and palpable as the scent of rain. The weight of generations bore down on me, yet in that moment, I realized that my spirit was transforming. I was no longer the reluctant heir, bound by the fear of my father's wrath. I had become a defiant leader, fueled by the promise of change and the courage to break free from our blood-stained traditions. The tension in the clearing was electric. My father's expression contorted, a flicker of disbelief crossing his stern features. "You dare challenge everything our ancestors have built?" he spat, his voice a venomous hiss that cut through the silence. "Without our traditions, you will bring chaos, not change." I stepped forward, each stride a declaration of independence. "Change is born from the courage to defy the old, corrupt ways," I declared, my tone both tender and unyielding. "Our legacy need not be one of endless cruelty and forced submission. I have seen a different way. A way where strength is measured not by domination, but by the capacity to love and protect. I will no longer be your pawn. I will forge a new path for our pack." Around us, the assembled wolves fell into a hush, their eyes flickering with a mixture of fear, admiration, and uncertainty. The silence was a fragile truce, shattered only by the low rumble of an approaching storm. My father's fists clenched at his sides, his breathing heavy and labored, as if the enormity of this confrontation was finally beginning to break him. "You think you can discard everything we are?" he roared. "You will regret this betrayal." The words struck like a lash, but they only served to fan the flames of my defiance. I recalled the countless nights spent in the oppressive shadow of his expectations, the cold lessons of forced loyalty that had scarred my soul. Every harsh word, every cruel command had been a chain. And now, as I stood before him, I felt the weight of those chains shatter within me. The pain of the past, once a source of endless sorrow, had transformed into a fierce determination, a burning resolve to redefine what it meant to lead. In a sudden, desperate motion, my father lunged forward, his age and arrogance fueling an attack that was more symbolic than effective. I met his charge head-on, our bodies colliding in a blur of strength and raw emotion. The impact was overwhelming, a physical manifestation of the years of repression and rivalry. For a heartbeat, our eyes locked. his filled with the cold fire of old traditions, mine alight with the new hope of liberation. The ensuing struggle was as much internal as it was physical. Every parry, every retaliatory strike, echoed with the painful memories of a childhood spent under the weight of his tyranny. I felt my heart pounding with both fury and sorrow as I fought against the man who had once been my guide and tormentor. I channeled every ounce of pain into my defiance, each blow a silent vow that his corrupt legacy would not continue. For a moment, the chaos of battle stilled into an eerie silence, punctuated only by our ragged breaths and the distant roll of thunder. I could see the conflict etched in my father's eyes, a tumult of anger, regret, and perhaps even a flicker of doubt. But then, with a cry that seemed to shake the very earth beneath us, he attacked again, the fight reaching a fevered pitch. In that heart-stopping moment, I delivered a final resounding strike that left both our futures suspended in uncertainty. As my father staggered backward, the raw, emotional culmination of years of suppressed rebellion surged through me. I stood, panting and bloodied, the decisive act hanging between us like a fragile truce. My body trembled, not from weakness, but from the overwhelming force of transformation. I had challenged the very foundation of our legacy, and in doing so, had redefined who I was. Yet, as the storm overhead broke into torrential rain, and the clearing became a battleground of shadow and light, I could not help but wonder, at what cost would this victory come? The outcome of our final confrontation remained uncertain, suspended in a fragile balance between old blood and new dreams. And in that uncertainty, as I gazed upon my fallen father, I knew that our pack's future, and my own destiny, would be forever altered by the choices made on this fateful night. The crowning of a new era. In the somber aftermath of that fateful confrontation, the forest clearing was transformed into an impromptu court, a silent arena where the remnants of old power were swept away by the fresh breath of change. The once feared traditions and harsh edicts that had long governed our pack now trembled in the wake of a hard-won revolution. Around me, the pack gathered in a tentative silence, their eyes wide with a mix of disbelief and cautious hope as they surveyed the shifting dynamics of leadership. The air was thick with the bittersweet scent of rain and the lingering aroma of spent blood, a poignant reminder of the sacrifices that had paved the way for this moment. There, amid the tangled branches and flickering torchlight, we began the ceremony to crown a new alpha, a ceremony as old as our lineage, yet reborn in spirit. Every wolf present felt the palpable weight of our collective history, the oppressive tyranny of the past and the tentative promise of a future built on the principles of compassion, choice, and justice. I stood before the gathered pack, my heart still pounding from the clash of that long, turbulent night. The echoes of battle, the anguished cries of loss, and the raw, unyielding determination that had defined our struggle, now intermingled with a serene, almost poetic calm. It was as if the very essence of the forest had lent its ancient wisdom to the proceedings, urging us to leave behind the brutal legacies of our ancestors. An elder, his fur flecked with silver and scars, stepped forward to lead the ceremony. His voice, soft yet resolute, carried the weight of years and memories as he intoned the sacred words of our custom. Today we stand at the crossroads of our destiny. The old ways, steeped in cruelty and forced obedience, have wrought suffering for too long. It is time to embrace a new path, one where our strength is measured by our ability to love, to choose, and to honor the spirit within each of us. His words wove a tapestry of hope, a vivid promise that this new era would be founded on justice rather than tyranny. I listened as murmurs of approval spread through the crowd. The air, heavy with emotion, seemed to shimmer with the promise of renewal. With each passing moment, I felt the embers of rebellion kindle into a flame of conviction. I stepped forward, the eyes of my kin upon me, and recited the oath I had long prepared for this decisive moment. I stand before you not as the reluctant heir of an oppressive legacy, but as a leader reborn, a guardian of the hope that burns within us all. I vow to reshape our traditions, to cast aside the chains of cruelty, and to lead us into a future where our power is defined by our compassion and our choices. My words, delivered with both fervor and vulnerability, resonated deeply among those who had gathered. In that moment, I sensed the shifting tides of loyalty and belief, an unspoken agreement that a better way was within reach. The ceremony continued in a hushed, reverent cadence, as one by one, the pack's elders and warriors approached to place a token upon my brow, a symbolic gesture marking the transfer of leadership. The tokens glowed softly in the torchlight, each one a fragment of our shared history and a pledge for a more just future. With every touch, I felt both the sorrow of our past, the lives lost, the hearts broken by brutal tradition, and the stirring of hope, a gentle reminder that change, though wrought with sacrifice, was possible. Yet amid the triumph, there was a quiet undercurrent of uncertainty. As the new alpha, my gaze swept over the faces of my kin, and I saw not only admiration, but also lingering doubt. The old ways had a firm grip on our nature, and the promise of freedom was fraught with the possibility of further strife. The murmurs of approval were tempered by anxious glances and whispered questions. Would this change truly bring lasting liberation, or was it merely the spark that would ignite a fresh conflagration of conflict? Standing there, crowned not just with tokens, but with the weight of a renewed legacy, I vowed to honor the sacrifice of those who had fallen and to lead with the integrity of my newfound conviction. I accept this crown not as a symbol of dominance, but as a burden of responsibility, I declared, my voice steady despite the tumult within. We have witnessed the cost of our past, and now we must tread a path that honors our strength and our capacity for love. I will work tirelessly to transform our pack, a transformation that may not be easy, but is necessary for our survival and our future. As the ceremony drew to a close, a profound silence settled over the clearing. The torches flickered in the cool night air, and the pack's eyes shone with a mixture of hope and trepidation. In that suspended moment, with the weight of our history behind us and an uncertain future ahead, a single, poignant question lingered in the air. Could this bold step towards a new era truly break the chains of our brutal past? Or would it simply set the stage for the next great battle within our hearts? And so, as the night stretched on and the fire's embers glowed softly beneath the stars, the future of our pack remained a tantalizing mystery, a promise of transformation teetering on the edge of both hope and conflict. Love's tender promise. In the quiet that followed the fierce debates of leadership and the echoes of a brutal past, a softer melody began to play, a melody of hearts quietly converging in the gentle aftermath of turmoil. Beneath a sky now, strewn with silvery stars and the fading glow of torches, Lady Silver and I found a secluded glade away from the restless crowd. Here, amid the delicate rustle of leaves and the soft sigh of a midnight breeze, we sought refuge in each other's presence, a sanctuary of tenderness amid lingering chaos. We settled beneath a towering oak, its ancient branches offering a protective canopy as if blessing our fragile moment of intimacy. Lady Silver's eyes, usually so guarded and enigmatic, shimmered with a quiet vulnerability that took my breath away. In that shared silence, her silvery fur seemed to glow with an inner light, reflecting not only the moon's soft radiance, but also the warmth of the promise that now flickered between us. "Do you ever wonder?" she began softly, her voice like the caress of a gentle stream. "If we could ever truly escape the legacy of our past? Not just for ourselves, but for all of us?" Her question, tender yet laced with an undercurrent of sorrow, resonated deep within me. I could feel the weight of our history, the brutal customs, the betrayals, the unyielding traditions, press upon us even in these quiet moments. I reached out and took her hand, the contact a silent vow of solidarity. "Every day," I replied, my voice low and earnest. "I long for a future where love isn't forced by fate, where we can choose our own destiny without the chains of our past weighing us down. I see in you a glimmer of that possibility, a hope that maybe one day we can reshape our world." Her eyes softened, and for a long while, we simply sat together, our intertwined fingers speaking a language of promises and shared dreams. The night air was cool against our skin, yet the warmth of our connection created a private summer beneath the starlight. The sound of distant celebrations and murmurs of a pack beginning to rebuild seemed so far away, as if we were the only two souls in a universe determined to let love prevail. In hushed whispers, we recounted fragments of memories, half-forgotten dreams of a time when our hearts beat freely and fiercely, unburdened by the weight of ancient demands. I spoke of the raw pain of battles fought and sacrifices made, while she revealed the quiet hope that had kept her going through nights darker than this one. There was a rhythm to our conversation, a cadence that echoed the pulse of nature itself, a heartbeat of renewal in a world marred by conflict. Yet even as our words wove a tapestry of tender promises, a shadow of uncertainty lingered at the edges of our intimate cocoon. I could sense unspoken questions and unresolved mysteries between us, whispers of past betrayals that neither of us had fully disclosed, hints of secrets that might yet unravel our delicate bond. There were moments when her gaze would falter, as if she were wrestling with a hidden truth, and I found myself silently wondering what challenges our union might face in the days to come. "You carry so much with you, Caden," she said one moment, her tone a mixture of admiration and gentle concern. "And sometimes I fear that what haunts us will always be a part of who we are. But I also believe that together, we can create something new, something beautiful. I want to believe that love can be our redemption, even if the past tries to pull us back." Her words, soft and resolute, filled me with both strength and a bittersweet longing. In that moment, I made a vow, not just to protect her, but to shield the tender hope that had kindled between us from the harsh winds of our shared legacy. "I promise," I murmured, "that I will do everything in my power to forge a future where our hearts are free. We will stand together against the darkness of our past, even if the road ahead is fraught with peril and uncertainty." A fragile silence enveloped us as the night deepened, the world around us holding its breath in anticipation. The promise of our future, radiant yet shrouded in the mist of unresolved secrets, hovered in the air like the soft glow of fireflies. The challenges of our existence, the scars of old wounds, and the potential for new betrayals were never far from our thoughts. Yet, in that tender embrace, there was also the stirring of something pure and transformative. As we sat there beneath the ancient oak, the world beyond our hidden refuge seemed to recede into a distant murmur. But even in this haven of soft confessions and mutual hope, a faint, insistent sound broke the delicate quiet, a distant, rhythmic tapping, as if the very ground were heralding an unforeseen twist. I looked into Lady Silver's eyes, and in that moment, the unspoken understanding between us deepened. Our journey was far from over, and the challenges that lay ahead might test every promise we made tonight. With a final tender squeeze of her hand, I whispered, "No matter what comes next, we face it together." And as the mysterious tapping grew slightly louder in the distance, our future, radiant with hope, yet uncertain, and laced with the possibility of fresh storms, remained, a promise waiting to be fulfilled, a new dawn and uncertain horizons. As the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, the night's tumult slowly yielded to a fragile peace. In that tender moment, the weight of our journey, the battles, betrayals, and bittersweet victories seemed to settle into a quiet reflection. The pack, scarred yet hopeful, gathered around the newly established order like a tapestry of memories interwoven with a promise of change. We had come a long way from the oppressive darkness that once defined our existence, and now, at the brink of a new day, the future shimmered with both potential and uncertainty. The remnants of our past, the savage traditions and brutal legacies, lingered in the cool air like ghosts. But in their place, a new ideal had begun to take shape. My heart, once burdened by the expectations of a tyrannical legacy, now pulsed with the warmth of a rebellion built on love and freedom. I remembered the pain of forced shifts and the echo of my father's cold commands. Yet those memories no longer held me captive. Instead, they had become the crucible in which our resolve was forged, a testament to our shared journey from darkness to this delicate, hopeful dawn. Around me, the faces of my kin spoke of a quiet revolution. Lady Silver's eyes, still reflecting, the lingering glow of the blue moon, shone with a serene determination, as if she could see the promise of a better future. Amelia, with her gentle strength, nodded in silent accord, a reminder that our bonds of loyalty were now founded on more than just survival. They were built on the desire for something profoundly human. In that unspoken communion, we recognized that our struggles were not just about breaking free from old rituals, but about reshaping our society into one where every heart could choose its own destiny. The air was filled with a soft, rhythmic cadence. The hum of the awakening forest mingled with the distant, hopeful chirping of birds. Each note seemed to celebrate our tentative triumph over the oppressive past, yet the melody was not without its minor chords. There remained an ever-present undercurrent of uncertainty, whispers of future challenges, murmurs that the next run, that relentless cycle of fate, might soon test our resolve once more. Our newfound unity was fragile, its strength measured in the quiet moments between battles and the lingering scars of what we had endured. In that reflective stillness, I found myself pondering the legacy we had inherited and the revolution we were only just beginning to shape. The brutal traditions of our forefathers had defined us for so long, binding us in cycles of violence and subjugation. Yet beneath that heavy mantle of history lay the possibility of transformation, a revolution born of compassion and the deep, unyielding desire for freedom. I knew that our journey was far from over. Even as we embraced this new dawn, the path ahead was laden with challenges that could either cement our progress or shatter our fragile hopes once more. The rising sun cast long, golden rays across the forest floor, illuminating both the scars of yesterday and the promise of tomorrow. Each beam of light was a silent vow, a declaration that no matter how dark our past had been, a future filled with possibility was within our reach. I stood there, a solitary figure at the threshold of a new era, my heart heavy with both the sorrow of what had been lost and the hope of what could be gained. The uncertainty was palpable. How would our society, so deeply rooted in the harsh ways of the past, adapt to this newfound vision of love and freedom? Could we truly dismantle the ancient structures that had long dictated our every move? Or would these very forces, like shadows at dusk, return to reclaim their hold on us? These questions echoed in my mind, each one a reminder that the road to change was as perilous as it was inspiring. As I gazed out over the awakening landscape, the possibilities unfolded before me like a vast, uncharted map. There was hope, a burning, tender hope that whispered of a revolution, not of chaos, but of transformation. Our pack, united by shared pain and an unyielding desire for something better, had taken the first step. Yet the horizon remained uncertain, a delicate balance between triumph and the ever-looming threat of further conflict. With the new dawn at hand and the promise of a better future shimmering on the edge of possibility, I let the warmth of that hopeful light fill me. In that silent, reflective moment, I vowed to lead our pack not by the iron fist of old traditions, but by the compassionate strength of a heart that believed in the power of love. And as I stepped forward into the golden light, I left you with this thought. In a world reborn from the ashes of cruelty, can true freedom and lasting peace finally flourish? Or will the old ghosts return to haunt our future once more? Imagine what comes next.